It's Tuesday, November 24. This is the news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom. Plans are being made to address the issue of river training as a mitigation tool to prevent crop losses from flooding. Several riverbanks overflowed following heavy rains in recent weeks, damaging farms and flooding homes in several parishes. The price tag from the losses so far is $25 billion and climbing. The Agriculture and Fisheries Minister Floyd Green says consideration is being given to developing a consistent river training program. He made the comment during a recent tour of the flood-damaged areas in St. Thomas. Farmers in Manchester, St. Elizabeth, St. Catherine, St. Thomas, Clarendon and St. Andrew are set to benefit from an initial $646.9 million support package, while the authorities assess and plan how to tackle the damages and prevention measures. Water will be trucked to sections of St. Catherine following disruptions from water supply. According to the National Water Commission, NWC, an internal electric problem stalled operations at the Cokeridge pumping station in St. Catherine. While that issue is being addressed, water will be trucked to the affected areas upon request. Affected areas include Burrows Hill, Bellas Gate, Cokeridge, Joe Ground, Sandhole, Content, Rule Town, Sandy Ground, Belfield, Marley Hill, Bamboo Ridge, Bartons, Wood Hall, Browns Hall, Gravel Hill, Blue Hole, and Macatree. Earl Jarrett has been appointed to head a subcommittee of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, the GTRCMC. The Jamaica National Group CEO got the nod from Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett. The announcement follows a specifically convened GTRCMC board meeting on the weekend. Jarrett will, in the coming weeks, outfit a full team for the subcommittee to begin exploring future strategies. After these sessions, a report will be forwarded. With the busy Christmas season on us, health officials are concerned of another COVID-19 spike. Recently, Nurses Association of Jamaica President Carmen Johnson urged the public to obey the health protocols. More in this report.
Limited social gatherings, the wearing of masks, and the frequent sanitizing of hands. This is what life looks like in 2020. Health officials have been urging the public to accept the new realities brought on by COVID-19. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton said as much as he addressed the National Health Research Conference last Thursday.
Life as we knew it 7 months ago, frankly speaking, is over. That's a very swift and simplistic, but nevertheless a truth. We must quickly come to terms with that, and we must adapt, changing our behaviors to suit and survive the new realities brought by the global COVID-19 pandemic.
Also, in an address to the Jamaica Medical Foundation earlier this month, Nurses Association of Jamaica President Carmen Johnson encouraged the public to take personal responsibility for the spread of the virus.
As a country, we must accept our own personal responsibility to protect the populace and to protect ourselves. We as nurses are committed to nurse every single patient that comes to our healthcare facilities or who we meet in the community. We are committed to ensure that they get the best healthcare and that they are nursed back to health. But you and I and all of us must ensure that we are protecting each other. Wear your mask when you go out. When you come in, don't go into the room to call to your people or to talk to the children or the elder before you change and before you wash your hands. One of the things we forget to do is to clean out the nostrils, clean out the ears. Can't remember the virus lodges anywhere. And so we need to do that before we go into our elder.
She said members of the public must take the view that everybody they encounter has the virus and act accordingly.
And so we must ensure we keep our physical distancing. So those who, when you join the line at the supermarket or the ATM line and you move away, and they're going to say, how are you for? How are you think? You think me have corona? Everybody have corona. And we must see it that way. Just as all as nurses were taught universal precaution, see everybody has been infected until proven otherwise. And so I'm saying to you, you may not have it. I don't know if I have it, and so I'm giving you your space. I'll step back. I'm giving you your space to protect you.
In the meantime, the country recorded 79 new cases on Monday. That means we have an overall 10,422 cases. However, only 4,465 of these cases are active. 4 deaths were also reported in the past 24 hours, pushing that total to 243. Over the same period, 54 recoveries were reported and 79 persons are hospitalized. There are 12 moderately sick and 14 patients are critical. For the news on PBCJ, I'm Gabrielle Thompson.
To date, more than 58 million people across the globe have tested positive from COVID-19. The race is on for a viable vaccine to be distributed equally. Director General of the World Health Organization, the WHO, Tedros Ghebreyesus, gave an update on the situation in a virtual press brief. The WHO boss says $4.3 billion is needed to support the mass procurement and delivery of COVID-19 vaccines, tests, and treatment around the world.
A further $23.8 billion will be needed next year. This isn't charity. It is the fastest and smartest way to end the pandemic and drive the global economic recovery.
The WHO has reported 10 vaccines being developed to combat COVID-19. 3 of those vaccines, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and Moderna, have posited successful clinical trials so far. Chief Scientist at the WHO, Dr. Samaya Swaminathan, says this is good news.
Remember, we have to cover a huge number of people, billions and billions of people. This is unprecedented. And we will need all the manufacturing capacity in the world to be able to do that.
Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus says the vaccine, in combination with other tried and tested public health measures, will help to end the pandemic.
The urgency with which vaccines have been developed must be matched by the same urgency to distribute them fairly. Every government rightly wants to do everything it can to protect its people. But there is now a real risk that the poorest and most vulnerable people will be trampled in the stampede for vaccines.
The distribution of treatments and vaccines is being worked out through the Advanced Market Commitment, AMC, of the COVAX facility, of which Jamaica is a part. It's the World Health Organization's framework for fair and equitable access to COVID-19 treatment and vaccines. 2 Jamaica Defense Force soldiers will be back in court on February 12 to face charges of dealing in ganja, as well as taking steps to export ganja, shooting with intent, illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. The soldiers, 39-year-old Rohan Mendez and 38-year-old Robert Smith, were granted bail in the sum of $800,000 when they appeared in court on Monday. In October, a joint police-military operation resulted in the seizure of 535 pounds of ganja, valued at $6.14 million from the men. This after a shootout with police who intercepted them in a JDF vehicle transporting the contraband. In the business report, the Bank of Jamaica is projecting a partial rebound in the economy for the fiscal year 2021-2022. Gabrielle Thompson has this and other market data.
The Jamaican economy is not expected to return to pre-COVID levels before at least financial year 22-23.
The Bank of Jamaica BOJ is projecting a partial rebound in economic growth of about 3% in the aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic starting in the fiscal year 2021-2022. Speaking Thursday at the central bank's quarterly briefing, Governor Richard Biles says the outturn could possibly be as high as 8%. This, he says, is dependent on strong recovery in tourism. The Statistical Institute of Jamaica's stat in June 2020 quarter growth outturn shows an 18.4% contraction in domestic economic activity. Governor Biles says it is a sobering indication of the extent of the pandemic's impact on the country.
The pandemic has also adversely impacted employment. The the most recent labor market data released by Statin in October indicating that approximately 12.6% of the labor force was unemployed at July, up from 7.8% a year earlier. We expect that the worst is behind us with the June quarter. Nonetheless, our latest projection for the end of the financial year 2020-21 is for rural economic activity to contract in the range of 10 to 12%, somewhat more than our previous projection of 7 to 10%.
The central bank governor said despite the fallout in economic activity due to COVID-19, the financial system has remained resilient throughout the pandemic.
Our regular assessment of deposit-taking institutions' balance sheets indicate that they are more than adequately capitalized and in compliance with prudent liquidity standards. Loan quality in the system, while naturally showing a small deterioration, remains well below the danger threshold. Specifically, the ratio of non-performing loans to total loans increased to 2.8% in September compared to 2.4% September the previous year. But this is well below the danger benchmark of 10%. At the same time, DTI's provisioning remains sufficient to withstand credit losses.
He says the BOJ will continue to closely monitor trends in loan quality given the heightened risks. In relation to Jamaica's external accounts, the BOJ governor said notwithstanding the fallout in tourism flows, the central bank expects that the current account deficit of the balance of payments will remain at sustainable levels of 2 to 4% of gross domestic product over the next 2 years.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is better than previously expected, supported by stronger than expected remittance inflows, a dramatic fall in imports, as well as lower levels of private capital flows. As such, Jamaica's reserves remain healthy, with net international reserves at the end of October amounting to approximately $2.9 billion.
In Monday's trading session, the JSE combined index advanced by 309 points to close at under 400,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 83 stocks, of which 40 advanced, 36 declined, and 7 traded firm. The junior market index advanced by 4 points to close at under 3,000 units. Stocks advanced for 1834 Investments Limited, AMG Packaging and Paper Company, and Barita Investments Limited. Stocks declined for Blue Power Group, Caribbean Assurance Brokers Limited, and Caribbean Cement Company. Trading firm were Access Financial Services, First Rock Capital Holdings USD, and Grace Kennedy Limited. Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial was the volume leader with 14.9 million units, followed by Wigton Wind Farm Limited ordinary shares with 3.7 million units and Trans-Jamaican Highway Limited with 3.5 million units. Now for the foreign exchange. The US dollar on Monday, November 23, ended trading at $148.22. The Canadian dollar sold for an average $113. The pound sterling traded for $196.48, and the euro ended trading at $177.29. Oil hit its highest since March on Tuesday, rising towards $47 a barrel as a third promising coronavirus vaccine spurred hopes of a quicker recovery in economic growth and oil demand in 2021. Brent crude futures rose 45 cents to $46.51 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate crude futures added 47 cents to $43.53 a barrel. And that does it for this edition of the Business Report on PBCJ. I'm Gabrielle Thompson.
In regional news, In the Bahamas, Prime Minister Hubert Minnis has broken his silence on the controversy being faced by his Deputy Prime Minister. Dr. Minnis told reporters on Monday that Cabinet will discuss the matter. Jasmine Brown reports.
Prime Minister addressed those pressing concerns about the Deputy Prime Minister here on the sidelines of an Access Accelerator ceremony where he says the matter has not gone unnoticed by Cabinet. The Prime Minister's comments come amid calls for the Deputy Prime Minister to resign over allegations of fraud contained in a recently filed writ by two companies he was a director for. Asked whether there are any plans for local authorities to launch an official investigation into the claims as called for by former PLP Cabinet Minister Damien Gomez, Minnis said this.
No, it's a court matter right now, and Cabinet is deliberating on it, and we'll get back to you as soon as Cabinet completes our deliberation and discussion.
Pressed further on whether he is concerned about the legal drama, Minnis responded.
Let me say again that Cabinet is deliberating on it, and as soon as we're completed, we'll get back to you.
There have been calls by the opposition for the Deputy Prime Minister to resign from Cabinet over accusations made against him by two companies, alleging his involvement in a reported $20 million plus fraud scheme. Turnquest has not commented on those calls for his resignation, but previously denied the claims. Meantime, the Prime Minister is insisting he is not concerned that scandals like the one surrounding Turnquest reflects badly on his administration and their chances in the next general election.
I think the people know exactly what we're doing. The people know our heart. The people know the challenges we face.
Reporting for our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
The opposition in Trinidad and Tobago is refuting claims that charges against gang members would collapse. This after the Anti-Gang Act failed to receive the majority of support required for an extension. On Friday, all opposition MPs abstained from voting for the bill in the lower house.
For 30 months, you have not shown this legislation to be effective. How can you ask us to give you a further 30 months?
This is the statement from UNC Senator Jayanti Lakshmi, justifying why the opposition did not support the extension of the Anti-Gang Act on Friday. She claims that Attorney General Faris Al-Rari pulled figures and not hard data, which shows that the law has been effective. In fact, she believes when the Anti-Gang Act would have been in full effect in 2019, murders were climbing. Last week, Opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar called for government to implement the public procurement legislation for their support on the anti-gang bill. Senator Lakshmi Dayal says the opposition still continues to call for that piece of law to be fully enforced since both laws are linked.
The impression came across that we just wanted to barter and trade, but that's not what it is. When you don't have proper procurement legislation in place, you can actually have the proliferation of gangs because they have access to funding.
The opposition, meanwhile, cited an article in a local newspaper where Director of Public Prosecutions Roger Gaspard is quoted as saying that criminal charges against gang members would not collapse despite the failure of the opposition to support the legislation.
When we spoke to certain members in the business community, they were also under the distinct impression that if this law did not pass on Friday, jail cells will all of a sudden be open and you had thousands of gangsters walking out of the prison. And that is just a false narrative that continues to be carried.
According to the opposition, the anti-gang law does not suppress gang or criminal activity and believes the data supports that it is not effective. But Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley on Saturday had a different view.
When the law first came into being, this sunset clause, meaning that the law would only last for a certain period of time, and the law was enforced for that period of time. During that period of time, the problem of gangs did not go away. The problem was still there.
The Anti-Gang Amendment Bill 2020 was not approved in the lower house on Friday after receiving 20 votes for, none against, and 19 abstentions, which came from the opposition. Sonolala, TTT News.
An information officer at the Government Information Center in St. Lucia is no longer a subject in an October 28 burglary. He, however, highlights what he says is incompetence on the part of the police. Miguel Favier has the details.
Is that I remember during my interrogation, the police officer said that the law was not my purview. It would seem that the law doesn't seem to be his either. I'm just appalled that in 2020, when we have all this technology available to us, that we still
Jacques Hinkson Compton remains annoyed, embarrassed and in disbelief. More now because he was informed via email by the RSLPF's head of crime, Superintendent George Nicholl, that he is no longer a suspect in the October 28th burglary and vandalism at the GIS offices. Compton was arrested a week following the incident and his home searched. Why? Well, because his car was parked in the parking lot of the UNORA house between 5:30 and 6 p.m. that afternoon while he went jogging. The other piece of evidence, he says, was a WhatsApp status posted 7 months prior, expressing his dissatisfaction with the direction in which the GIS was heading. But the information officer believes that there was no reason to arrest him in the first place and questions the competence of the police force. A week after his arrest, he emailed the head of crime, CC'd to the arresting officer, furnishing them with a list of 7 points to assist in either finding the perpetrator or at least exclude him from suspicion.
The security cameras owned by the landlord of the building, UNORA House. You could have used the cameras at the Rubis gas station, which is across from the UNORA House, as well as the Lucia building, which is also across from the UNORA House. You could have used the finance center, which is sort of adjacent to UNORA House. And if in the event that the burglars came from behind the building, the Red Cross building also has security cameras, which should be pointed at the road. If had the police just taken the time to go through those different areas where there is definitely security cameras, where there are definitely security cameras, then I'm sure they could have determined who the burglar actually was.
Instead of resorting to, quote, draconian measures, such as interrogating him with, quote, much hostility, as well as bringing up a 7-month-old WhatsApp status.
I'm sure this was fine in the 90s or even before independence or adult suffrage, but in this day and age, we have a lot of things we have a lot of technology that's available to us to be able to solve crimes like this. In fact, I even mentioned to the officer while I was in his custody that if you remember on the arrest forms and the search warrant forms that I would have shown to you when I last spoke with you, a DJI drone was stolen from the GIS. Now the company DJI can actually track a drone for you, which I mentioned to the police officer, in which he replied that if anyone was smart enough to do what they did at the GIS, then this person could easily remove the tracking device from the drone, which tells me that he wasn't even interested in actually trying to track down the drone.
The WhatsApp status continues to nag at the information officer. Compton wonders whether the police have thought to direct their attention towards the individual who screenshot and shared the status with the investigating officer, believed to be a very senior officer at the GIS. He continues to consult his legal representatives regarding redress for the embarrassment of the arrest. The information officer, however, is grateful for the support and encouragement he received from GIS staff, both past and present, members of the local media fraternity, and friends and family locally and overseas. Miguel Favre, NBC Prime.
In sports, we take to the courts with netball. International Netball Federation President Liz Nicholl has given her blessing to the upcoming test series between Jamaica's Sunshine Girls and host England. The series was set for early next month. However, lockdown in England promoted by a fresh COVID-19 wave led to the matchup being postponed until January of next year. Like major global sporting fixtures, the INF has been forced to postpone a number of its tournaments because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Nicholl says, however, that a successful staging of the Jamaica-England series would be a catalyst for a safe return of international netball. And that's our news package. Thanks so much for making it PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom. Pleasant viewing.